Oko threw another handful of wet mud at her grandfather's face and watched it splatter across his weathered cheeks. The old man flinched and raised his trembling hands to shield himself. "Please, my children, I beg you," Ichie Ono's voice cracked with exhaustion. "I am your elder. Show some respect for my grey hairs." But Oko only laughed harder and signaled to her twin brothers. Mona grabbed a rotten mango from the ground, while Emeka picked up a handful of pebbles. At 10 years old, the boys had learned to follow their sister's lead in everything, including cruelty. The mighty man who had once commanded fear and respect throughout Umoku village now sat helpless in his wooden chair, too weak to stand, too blind to defend himself, too proud to beg properly for mercy. The neighbors watching from their compounds shook their heads in pity. They all knew Ichie Ono would not survive much longer, not from the children's attacks, but from the shame that was eating him alive faster than any disease. But this is not the beginning of the story. 6 years earlier, when Oko was 12 and lived in a small but comfortable compound with her parents, Nnamdi and Adora. Her father was the most skilled palm wine tapper in 3 villages, climbing the tallest trees with fearless grace and producing wine so sweet that people would travel from Aja just to taste it. Her mother wove akwete cloth with patterns so intricate that wealthy women fought over her work at the Ike market. They lived in perfect happiness, wanting for nothing. She had never heard of Ichie Ono, her grandfather, until the sickness came like a thief in the night. It started with her father's hands trembling as he climbed the palm trees. At first, they laughed about it, joking that he was getting old and lazy. The laughter died when both parents could barely stand up one morning. Within weeks, both parents were almost looking like corpses. Every herbalist in the village came to examine them, but none could name the sickness or provide a cure. Finally, a traveling medicine man from Enunu brought hope. He told them about a healer who lived in the mountains, but his services cost more than all that Oko's parents have left. Nnamdi called Oko to his bedside one morning. "My daughter, you must go to your grandfather Ichie Ono. He lives in the big compound at the center of Umoku village. Tell him his son is dying and needs help to reach the mountain healer." Oko stared at her father in complete confusion. In 12 years, she had never heard mention of any grandfather. Oko walked the 3 kilometers to Umoku village with her heart pounding between hope and nervousness. The compound she found took her breath away. It was like something from the stories her mother told about ancient kings. Multiple buildings with shiny corrugated iron roofs surrounded the vast central courtyard. Servants moved with purposeful energy between enormous yam barns, chicken coops that housed hundreds of birds, and goat pens filled with the finest animals she had ever seen. This grandfather was clearly a man of tremendous wealth and influence. Ichie Ono received her in his obi, a magnificent building decorated with carved ivory and brass ornaments that gleamed in the lamplight. He sat on an elaborate wooden throne while 2 young men fanned him with beautifully woven palm fronds. "So?" he asked after listening to her explanation. "Nnamdi is sick, and now after 20 years of silence, he remembers he has a father." Oko fell to her knees on the polished floor. "Please, Ichie, my parents are dying and you are our only hope." Ichie Ono stared at her for what felt like eternity. Finally, he gestured to a young servant. "Bring the child something for her journey," he commanded. The servant returned with a small wooden bowl containing 3 overripe bananas, their skins black with decay and their flesh soft with rot. "Take this to your parents," Ichie Ono said. "It's all I can spare for Nnamdi's family." Oko stared at the rotten fruit in disbelief. Around her, the room blazed with evidence of enormous wealth. She could see through the open doorway to storerooms filled with cowries, more than enough to pay a dozen mountain healers. She lay down and pleaded again and again, but it was obvious his mind was made up. "Get out of my house, girl, before I have you thrown out." She ran all the way home, crying bitterly. Her parents took one look at her tear-streaked face and understood that their hope was dead. They died 3 days later. That night, as she lay on her sleeping mat with her baby brothers, coiled against her for comfort, Oko decided to go to Ichie Ono's house before she and her brothers died of hunger. The next morning, she walked with her twin brothers, Mona and Ameka, to Umoku village. When the servants tried to turn them away at the compound gates, Oko planted herself in front of the main house and refused to move. Ichie Ono appeared, his face stagnant with fury at the sight of them. "We have nowhere else to go," Oko begged. "I owe you nothing," Ichie Ono shouted. "Get out of my compound before I have you beaten and thrown into the forest." Then we'll stay here and starve, and the whole village will know that the mighty Ichie Ono let his grandchildren die on his doorstep. He reluctantly asked them to stay in an empty old hut that was formerly used for storing grain. "But you will work for every food you eat. You will earn your place here just like everyone else in this compound." What followed were 4 years of cruelty that would have broken weaker children, but it strengthened Oko's determination for revenge. Ichie Ono walked them from dawn to dusk in his vast yam farms and gave them barely enough food. When Oko tried to steal, she was caught and punished with extra work and reduced rations. The beautiful girl who had once been her parents' pride became thin and hard. But suffering, Oko discovered, was also education. She learned to move through the compound without making sound. She studied her grandfather's routines with the dedication of a hunter stalking dangerous prey, noting his habits, his fears, his weaknesses. By the time she turned 16, Oko had become an expert thief. With the little she stole, she was able to stay alive. The opportunity finally came on the night of Ichie Ono's 70th birthday celebration. Important men from 5 villages attended, bringing expensive gifts and offering elaborate praise for his wisdom and generosity. After the guests departed, and the compound fell into the deep silence that comes after great celebrations, Oko made her move. She had been planning this moment for years, gathering information and materials with the careful attention to detail that her mother had once applied to her finest weaving. The one place on the compound she had never dared enter was Ichie Ono's private chambers. He had warned them repeatedly that the room was forbidden to everyone. Oko's hands trembled as she approached the heavy wooden door, but her resolve never wavered. From her wrapper, she pulled a small calabash containing a mixture she had spent months perfecting. The room was exactly as terrifying as she had imagined. Half of it served as his personal shrine, filled with carved figures that seemed to watch her with scary eyes. But she had come too far to be stopped by fear. Ichie Ono lay on his bed in deep sleep, his breathing slow and regular from the effect of palm wine and exhaustion. She poured the burning mixture directly into his sleeping eyes. Ichie Ono's screams could wake even the dead. On his bed, he screamed desperately for servants to help him. By morning, it became clear that Oko had accomplished far more than simply blinding her grandfather. The compound, which had never been quiet during daylight hours, was strangely silent. Oko sent the twins to investigate the largest farms. They returned with outstanding news. The fields were completely empty of workers. The servants' quarters that had housed dozens of people were also abandoned. As they stood, trying to understand what was going on, they saw a male servant run past the compound gates, moving with the desperate speed of someone fleeing great danger. Oko called out to him, but he would not even slow down. By midday, the vast compound that had once bustled with activity was occupied only by Oko, her brothers, and the blind old man, whose screams of confusion and rage echoed from inside the main house. Every humiliation Ichie Ono had inflicted on them was returned tenfold. When he was hungry, they gave him the same meager portions he had given them, sometimes even less. When he called for help navigating the compound he could no longer see, they ignored him as he had ignored their parents' suffering. Sometimes they hid his walking stick and watched him crawl around searching for it, his hands bleeding from contact with rough surfaces. "Please," Ichie Ono would beg, his voice cracking with exhaustion and despair. "Show mercy to an old man who gave you shelter when no one else would." "Mercy?" Oko replied, her voice carrying all the hatred she had stored up over 6 years of suffering. "Did you show mercy when our parents begged you for help? Did you show mercy when you walked us like animals in your fields? Did you show us mercy when you cast the spells that killed our mother and father?" The neighbors were horrified by what they witnessed, but none intervened directly. Some believed the children were justified in their revenge, that Ichie Ono was finally receiving the punishment his cruelty had earned. Others thought the family had been possessed by evil spirits that would eventually consume them all. The old man himself seemed to understand that his fate was sealed. His angry shouts and threats gradually gave way to weary acceptance. He stopped calling for help that would never come. He stopped trying to negotiate with grandchildren who had no interest in mercy. He sat in his chair each day, blind and broken, waiting for his end. Ichie Ono died on a rainy night in the 8th month after Oko blinded him. But in death, Ichie Ono had one final lesson to teach his granddaughter about the complexity of justice and revenge. The morning after his burial, Oko stood in the center of the compound that was now hers, surrounded by wealth beyond anything she had ever imagined possible. Rooms full of cowries, storehouses packed with yams and palm oil, buildings that could house dozens of people in comfort, land that stretched to the horizon in every direction. She was 18 years old and richer than most men twice her age. More importantly, she was free. Free from her grandfather's cruelty, free from the daily struggle to survive, free to build whatever kind of life she wanted for herself and her brothers. The long nightmare that had begun with her parents' death was finally over. "What do we do now, sister?" Mona asked one evening as they sat on the veranda of their inherited mansion, watching the sunset paint the sky. Oko looked out over the vast compound that now belonged to them, feeling the weight of responsibilities and possibilities she had never had to consider before. She thought about the kind of woman she wanted to become and the kind of life she wanted to build from the ashes of so much hatred and suffering. "I do not know," she admitted. "For so long, all I wanted was to make him pay for what he did to us. Now that he's gone, I have to figure out who I am when I'm not planning revenge."